Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the Mekko Graphics webinar. This is David Goldstein, and I'll be walking you through today some of the best, the most well-received of the charts of the week that we did over 2017. For those of you who don't know, every week on the Mekko Graphics website, we add a chart of the week, mostly done by me, but sometimes one of my colleagues will step in. We try to make these charts as interesting as possible. We try to show data and deliver a message that that our customers will find interesting, and we also at the same time try to show you what you can do with Mekko Graphics, introduce you to some features or tips or ideas for making charts that will work well with Mekko Graphics. So what I would like to do today in the next half hour is show you some of these charts, show you how to make a couple of the charts, and we'll do that probably between now and 11 a.m. Eastern time, so a little less than half an hour. And after that, I will stick around and answer any questions. If you have questions during the webinar, one of my colleagues is monitoring the chat and question features in GoToMeeting, so feel free to ask, and they will get back to you. So without further ado, let me just dive in, talk to you a little at a high level. We chose 5 charts which we found as the most popular. They are a mix of stacked bar, bubble, and Marimekko charts, and a couple of dashboards, which are a combination of multiple charts delivering a single message. So I'm going to start, and they also sort of cover a bunch of different topics. It seems with our user base, sports and beer are very popular. Two of the top charts are U.S. sports related. We do also had a few European sports and world sports related charts in the chart of the week. We try to make the charts cover interests for our worldwide client base. And one was beer related, which I thought was interesting. We will let me start by jumping in and taking a look at the first chart, probably our most popular chart. A chart that I found super interesting, partly because the economics of college sports in the United States never cease to amaze me. The fact that a college football conferences in the United States could earn $300 million or more, or $20 million per college or more in a year from sports is a little eye-opening. I wanted to try to capture that. I saw an interesting piece on it in Forbes, and I thought the best way to capture it was in a horizontal stacked bar chart. And I used the chart. I made it horizontal with the biggest, the conference with the most revenue on top. It's very easy to see that the top 5 conferences are significantly bigger than the next 5. And you can also see by looking at the stacked bar that TV revenue is the biggest driver in all of those conferences. You'll notice that I ordered each bar so that the biggest revenue stream was at the bottom of the bar. and I sorted the bars from top to bottom based on revenue per school. Often in a stacked bar chart, I will add a data row or data column to include a key performance indicator. So in here I'm looking at total revenue in the chart, and the complementary revenue per school is as my key performance indicator. So I'm going to show you how to make this chart. So I'm going to escape from Mekko Graphics. I've got a blank slide here. I'm going to go to my Mekko Graphics ribbon and choose horizontal stacked bar chart. I will launch my Mekko Graphics data editor. I've got the data for my chart right here in Excel. So I'm going to copy the Excel data and paste it into Mekko Graphics. And you'll notice that I've got the revenue for each conference broken out into 3 categories. I added a formula for the total revenue. I input the number of schools, and I did a calculation to come up with revenue per school. I did that all in my Excel here. And then from here, what I need to do is tell Mekko Graphics which bars I want to appear on my chart. And I can do that a couple of ways. One is I can go into bars and series, which is the way I teach new Mekko Graphics users. And I can say, well, I don't want total and I don't want number of schools to be on my chart, so I just click it off. There is another way to do this. If you become more familiar with Mekko Graphics, just right here in the spreadsheet, you can right-click on on the column here and just say, I don't want this on the chart. I want to show this as a data column. And now we've got the data lined up here. And now what I'd like to do is play with it a little to make the chart look a little better. I typically try to deal with my margins first, just to get the chart to fill the chart area. And next, what I'm going to do is in Format Chart, I'm going to sort. And what I want to do is I want to display the bars so that the first is on the top. I want it to go from biggest to smallest rather than from smallest to biggest. And I want to sort my series so that the biggest is on the bottom. And here the series indication is biggest on left. So I've done that. The next thing I want to do is change my axis so that the biggest bar gets closer to the end of my chart. So if I reduce this to say 550, now my bars fill out my chart a little better. And I want to hide this axis because I don't have this axis on my chart. And if you just right click on the axis, you can just click on hide axis here. I also want in Format Chart to hide all of my labels. I don't want any labels appearing in my chart segments. So I just click hide all to hide all my labels. But I do want to show my labels in a legend. So I'm going to click legend. And the label appears here in the legend. And there's not a lot of room for the legend, so I'm going to drag it out of its space and make it bigger. And now I'm pretty close. The last, one of the last things I want to do to this chart is format my numbers, because these should all be, my bar totals should all be in millions of dollars. You can do that here in Format Chart Values. by clicking clicking bar totals and change it to dollars millions. But even more convenient, you can just right click and say, I want all my bar totals. Just click on any bar total, right click, and then you can say dollars and millions. And if I click on my revenue per school, I also want that in dollars and millions, but I also want that with 1 decimal place. Now I'm in pretty good shape. I think the chart looks pretty good. If I want, I can alter the colors of the series if I want. I think in the chart example, I made the last series a green, which is very easy to do. That makes a little more contrast so you can see the biggest on the bottom and how that varies from one to the other. And I might make all my labels the same size. These look to be 9. These are 9. I think this is even a little smaller, 7. I can do Control A to select all my labels and change them all. Let me try 10. Oh, 10 works. Cool. So there I go. I've got the chart in pretty good shape, horizontal stacked bar. I think these horizontal stacked bars work really well with, in this case, I've got 10 different conferences. These work well for competitors or for products, and I've done them in a typical landscape slide with as many as 20 different items in my bars. Sometimes I'll do them stacked, and sometimes I'll just do them as a bar chart. Sometimes I will use categorization for colors. I did that. I have another example. Let me just show you quickly. I did a chart of the week last week on the cost of a Starbucks latte around the world. And again, a horizontal stacked bar chart. And here I colored my different bars based on region. So I added a color variable based on region, and I included that in my legend. And I also moved my data column from the end where it was in my other chart to in between my bar label and my bar. So I just I started with them over here, and then I moved them in here. If you want to learn more about this chart, there is a chart of the week blog post last week on it, and you're welcome to take a look at it and download the chart. You can download any of these charts from the Mekko Graphics website. So that was my horizontal stack bar, our most popular chart. The second chart I wanted to show you is a bubble chart, and it is the European beer consumption bubble chart. This was also a very, very popular chart, and I wanted to show you how to make it. A couple of things high level with respect to bubble charts. I often like to add quadrant lines to bubble charts. I think that helps classify things, and you often want to take a look at the elements that are off the diagonal. So these two tend to be the less interesting quadrants because they're low on both of your measures or high on both of your measures. But the ones in this quadrant here are countries that have high growth in consumption but low per capita consumption. So if you're looking for countries maybe to grow the beer market, you might look at Italy, France, and Spain. These are the largest with growing consumpment, and you can tell the largest by in terms of liters consumed by looking at the size of the bubbles, which is interesting because these are, along with Switzerland, are sort of the traditional, what I would think is the traditional sort of wine drinking countries, but it looks like they are growing in their consumption of beer as well. So let me jump in and show you how to make the bubble chart. So I've got my data here in Excel. I am going to use the, just to be different, I'm going to use the Marimekko Graphics Excel add-in and select Chart in PowerPoint and select Bubble. Jumps me back to PowerPoint. I can just click on the slide here, insert my bubble chart, and you can see it's here, but it's a little bit of a mess. Bubbles are tricky, and they require a little more effort to make them look good than the standard bar charts. And I have an approach to bubbles to try to reduce the amount of time and rework I do in creating a bubble chart. The first thing I would do with the bubbles is change my margins so that the chart fills my slide a little better. Drag this margin back a little so I can see my full reference bubble. Okay, now I can click off my margins because I don't really need them from here. The next thing I would do is change my axis scale, and I can do that either by clicking on my axis and dragging it down here, dragging the maximum to 150. And whenever Marimekko Graphics thinks a bubble is going to be outside the range, it'll give you this little warning. Most of the time you can ignore the warning. And I would click on my x-axis, on my y-axis, and drag this down to 1.5. And I can also go into Format Axis and set my y-axis tick interval to 0.05 and tell Marimekko Graphics that I want to show this as a percentage. And my x-axis tick interval I can change to 25. And now I want to make all of the bubbles in the chart. The bubbles came out really large. I want to make them smaller. But before I do that, I want to data scale my bubbles, because right now the bubble says 15,000 and I want it to just say 15. So if I go to Format Chart and click on Values, Data Scale Values, I can scale my values. So now it's 15. I can just go back to Axes, where my reference bubble is. I can then set my reference bubble size from 15 to 50. And now my bubbles are a much more reasonable size. I can add a units of billions and a title to my reference bubble here. And now my chart is starting to look pretty good. I need to go back to Format Chart and I need to go back to Format Axis, I think. And then on my y-axis, I want to hide this 0 line, which is dashed, which is right here. And then I want to go back to Format Chart, and I want to add quadrant lines. So I want to add a line at 0, horizontal, make it visible, show it at 0, and a vertical line at 75. So now I've got my quadrants, and my chart is in pretty good shape. So the last thing I do in my bubble chart is I would drag and reformat my labels. Because if you don't do this last, then you start moving your labels around and then change your axes or your bubble size, then the labels don't look good. So I always save my bubble labels for last. And then it's really just a question of dragging. It's almost like solving a little puzzle. Where can I put them so that they don't interfere with each other? They show what you want to show. And it's really just a question of doing this little dragging and dropping. If you don't want these little annotation lines, you can just right click on the label, and right here you can show hide the annotation line. So that's really the last trick in creating the bubble chart, is to just move your labels around. So excuse me, that's my bubble example. The third chart I wanted to show you was a Marimekko. It's always good to have a Marimekko chart in your most popular charts, because they're often the ones used most. Again, it's a sports related chart. I thought it was interesting because I never really understood the economics of the different positions in a football team. I always assumed that quarterbacks were going to be the highest paid because they're always the most talked about. I was a little surprised at how highly paid cornerbacks are. A little surprised that offense and defense were almost the same in terms of salary by position, and very surprised that people who run the ball, running backs and fullbacks, are underpaid relative to the people who block for them, left tackles and guards. So I thought it was an interesting chart. I only wanted to point out a couple of things on the chart, just to show you a couple of Mekko Graphics features I used. One is rotating labels. So if you've got a really thin segment on the right-hand side, you can just right-click on a label, and this little label orientation button allows you to change the label to vertical. And the same if you've got a label that's sitting inside a segment and is really small, you can easily drag it out and it will annotate. So those are really the only two tricks with this. Oh, one more trick with this chart. One feature that we added in the last version of Mekko Graphics is a coloring mode feature in Format Chart. This was specifically asked by one of our clients who makes a lot of Marimekko charts and makes a lot of sorted Marimekko charts. This chart is sorted with the biggest on the bottom in each of the bars. Our default for coloring a Marimekko chart is by series. So the first series in your spreadsheet is going to have the first color in your draw order, followed by the second and the third, which leads you to kind of a mishmash of colors. But if you've got a color template that you want to follow and you're sorting, you can choose by series after sort as your coloring mode. So by series after sort, now the first segment that I draw, quarterback, is going to be my first color, wide receiver my second, guard my third, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see how this color palette is a set of blues, a set of greens, a set of purples, and a set of browns. So those were the tricks with the Marimekko chart. Let me move on and show you a couple of dashboards. Dashboards are really popular when we put them up. They're a little bit of work for us because it's, instead of making one chart, I'm making 4 or 5. But they are a great way to tell a story. And I think you can think of dashboards in two different ways. You can think of them as a report I put together every week or month or quarter on the performance of my business, where I'm showing the same dashboard all of the time. Or you can think of them as just a picture, a snapshot of a business in a series of charts. And these are more the snapshots. So I chose 5 charts based on some data I found from the American Pet Products Association to give you an overview of the pet industry. The first chart shows that the industry is growing as a whole at about 6% per year. I used the growth line with the CAGR for that. The second chart talks about which pets are most popular, and not surprising, dogs and cats. And then there was a significant fall off after that. And then the bottom three charts talk about the different spending for the different pets. This one looks at overall pet spending, breaking it down into sort of its major categories. But I thought it was super eye-opening to look at how much dog owners and cat owners spend on their pets on average in a year. I'm not a dog owner or a cat owner, so this was kind of surprising to me. I guess if you have one of these pets, then you might be more aware of this. But I was surprised at how much veterinary care costs the average dog or pet owner. So I put these 5 charts together to really deliver that dashboard and that message. The next dashboard was a moviegoer's dashboard, and here my approach was slightly different. I wanted to show how moviegoers broke down by age and ethnicity, and I tried to do a parallel analysis for age and for ethnicity in the 2 charts. So the 2 charts on the left deal with age, the 2 charts on the right deal with ethnicity. The top 2 charts are very similar. They basically look at their 100% stacked bar charts, and they try to address the issue, is there a difference between share of population and share of tickets sold? So you can see that here, 18 to 24-year-olds make up only 10% of the population, but they account for 16% of the tickets sold. And the same with 12 to 17-year-olds, 8% of the population, 13% of the tickets sold. So a big difference between population and tickets sold, which I reinforced in this data column. And I did the same with ethnicity here. It turns out that this Asian other segment is the one that proportionately buys a lot more tickets than Caucasians or Hispanics or African Americans. And then that was reinforced with these 2 Marimekko charts at the bottom, which looked at per capita attendance by age group. So the heights of these bars are per capita attendance, and the widths are the size of the age groups. So you can see these 2 relatively small age groups have significantly higher per capita attendance. I use the average line to separate the higher from the lower, and you can also see here that the Asian other segment had a much higher per capita attendance. So again, a dashboard, a bunch of charts, related charts. The only trick I would tell you, or one of the tricks I would tell you in creating a dashboard, is it's important to have the charts be the same size. So I would start by making this chart, this 100% stack bar chart, making it look as good as possible. And then I would copy paste. So I have my margins the same and my data columns the same. And then I would change my data from age to ethnicity. Then the charts would be very much in parallel. The bottom, the bar labels would line up. The data columns would be in relatively the same place. And I did the same thing here with my two Marimekko charts. So that's my best practice for making a dashboard. So that I got through my top 5, and I'm almost at my half-hour mark. I did include in the presentation several other charts that you'll be able to download and take a look at. I included this one because it's a great Marimekko to look at how the U.S. government spends its money, and I encourage you to take a look at USA Facts website, which is a great source of data on government spending, federal and state. If you ever need it for analysis that you're doing, I think this is a great place to look. Then I've got a bubble chart here, which I took from a MasterCard website. I used the groups in my bubble chart to specify regions. And I just wanted to point out one other thing in my bubble chart. The data here is in this PDF, the 64-page PDF from MasterCard. I used a really nice tool. I've used it for several of my charts, and I don't tend to promote other tools, but I found this really useful. It's a website called PDF Tables, and it allows you to convert a PDF into a table in Excel. So this just made it much easier for me to create this chart because without having to enter the data or doing an extensive amount of copying and pasting, I was able to get this into an Excel table, and that really jump-started my my creation of a chart. So if you're going out to the web and you're finding interesting data embedded in PDFs, I'd recommend taking a look at PDF Tables as a website. The cost, you can try it for free for a while, but the cost is relatively minimal to create these create the PDF, the Excel documents from your PDFs. I also had this another great source of data is that I like is CB Insights. They've got a table on unicorns, which is publicly available, which is great. Very easy in Mekko Graphics, just to copy paste their data into PowerPoint, into Excel, and then create a pivot table and draw your Mekko Graphics chart off your pivot table. So I would, if you haven't used pivot tables to take data like this and convert it into Marimekko charts, I would definitely recommend you exploring it. If you're familiar with the VLOOKUP command in Excel, that can also be really useful to add additional categories to your spreadsheet, which can be useful in the charts. So I think that's all I wanted to show you. I've got one more chart that shows quarterly income, which is a perennially useful chart, and I included it in the deck. And I also have here in the last slide of the deck a set of resources that are available for you on our website, videos, chart of the week, in Mekko Graphics. Ask an expert under help. If you've got a question, you can send us an email via this. If you run into a bug or an issue with how the software works, you can also click on this email support button, which also will get back to us. And follow us. I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me. Mekko Graphics is on LinkedIn. You can follow the company. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. I will post this presentation. I will email this presentation or send a link to this presentation to all the attendees. And we also recorded this presentation, and we will make the video available. So if you've got a colleague who you think would find this interesting, feel free to share the deck and share the presentation with them. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you all have a great holiday. I will stick around for a little while longer. If you've got questions for me on these charts or any of the other charts, I would be happy to answer them. And if not,